Begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Daled, 11 lines down from the top of the Amud, where it says Gufa. The Gemara before brought the pasuk where it says B'chol kodesh leisiga ve'ela mikdash leisavai, and there was a Braise and also Reish Lakish. He darshan that this pasuk is speaking about not to eat from kachim, even though it says siga. But you learn out from the context of the pasuk that it speaks about not eating from kachim. And another detail the Gemara mentioned before is that Reish Lakish was mechadesh, that this refers also to eating from the kachim even before zrika. From the context of the pasuk, as Rashi brought from the Gemara of Menachis, you see that the chiyuv of kares. Now, let me just add one thing that I didn't say. Tame, right? B'chol kodesh leisig. We're talking about someone that's tame, that's eating from the kachim. Okay, so Reish Lakish says, even though from the context of the pasuk you see that the iser of eating from the kachim when it's tamei is after the zrika of the dam, when the kapara is done, and now you can eat from it. Then, if you eat from it when you're tamei, you chayav kares, as the pasuk there says, v'nichrisa. But nevertheless, Reish Lakish is medayik because it says in the pasuk b'chol kodesh leisiga. That adds that even before the zrika, also if you eat from it, there's going to be a isser, even if no kares. There'll be a lav, malchus. Okay, so now the Gemara goes back onto this point. Guf, so here again is what Reish Lakish says. Machlekes actually, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Tamei sha'achal b'sar kodesh lefnei zrike. A person is tamei and he eats from the basar of the carbon before zrike. Reish Lakish amar loike. Reish Lakish says there's malchus, that's part of the lav. B'chol kodesh leisiga. Rabbi Yochanan amar. Rabbi Yochanan says eina loike. There's no malchus from this because it's not. He doesn't hold of this drasha of B'chol kodesh leisiga. And he learns out this Gemara brought before that there's a Gzeira Shava, Tum Asai, that he learns out that it applies only in a place where there's Kares. Before Zrike, because you can't eat from the Basar B'chlal, there's no Kares. So therefore, the Pasuk is not speaking about this, so there's no Lav either. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says now about this Machlekes Betumas Aguf. The argument here regarding eating the basar before the zrika of the dam is when the person that's eating, he's tamei. Aval betumas basar. But if the case over here is that you're eating from the carbon when the basar of the carbon itself is tamei, and you're eating from it before zrika of the dam, divrei akai loike. Here, everybody will agree, even Rabbi Yochanan that says that there's no malchus, but he would agree that in this case there is malchus. Why?
Somebody who's not tamei is allowed to eat the basar before zrika?
No, you're not allowed to. You're not supposed to eat it, but we're not only talking about an isser. The question is whether there would be malchus or not. Should there be malchus? So Abaye is saying that Rabbi Yochanan would agree that there'll be malchus.
For everybody or just for the tamei?
Tamei, for a person that's tamei.
And a regular person doesn't?
No malchus.
No, the
you're
meat
not supposed
is
to eat it
tamei.
from
The
it.
meat is, that's where the meat
Yeah,
is
the
tamei.
meat is tamei. The meat is tamei.
The person is not tamei.
Correct. The person is tahir and he eats from the meat which is tamei. So Abaye says everybody would agree that there's malchus.
How do make it someone touching it? Absolutely.
The Amakra, because the pasuk says, or Rashi here is great, is the Amamar, that this is a drasha that Abaye is quoting, that it says in the pasuk, Vahabasar, in this pasuk, where it speaks about the basar itself being tame. That's what the pasuk is speaking about here. If you look on the sides, Vabasar ashayiga b'chol tame lo yeyachol. That's the lav. It says that the basar which is tame, you should not eat from it. And Beish Yisarav has to be burnt, but then at the end of the pasuk it repeats again the word basar. Veha basar koltar yechol basar. So that word veha basar in the pasuk that it says a second time is extra. Why does it say it a second time? L'rabbeis eitzim u'levaina delav b'nei achila nino. That the pasuk is coming to say that not only if you eat from the meat of the carbon, which is tamei, will the person be over on this lav, but even if you're eating from something which is not basar, you're eating from the eitzim, the wood of a carbon that's placed on the mizbeach to burn the carbon, or from the levaina, which is the frankincense, which is placed on the shulchan, that even that, which is not roi to eat, but yet if a person eats from this, he will be over on this lav as well. So these, again, the lav and echilin, these are things that are not meant for eating, but still the pasuk says if you eat from it when it's tamei, that you're over on this lav. So what's Abaye saying? Just like you see regarding the eitzim and the levaina that are not made for eating, but if it's tamei, you can be over on this lav. So the basar of the carbon before the zrike is also not made for eating yet. It's physically roi la'achila, but it's before its time. You didn't complete the what to be matter to eat it. You didn't spray the blood on the mizbeach yet. But nevertheless, if by eitzim and levina you're going to be over on the slav, so regarding the basar of the carbon before the zrika, it's the same thing. Everybody will agree that it's included in this riboy of veha basar that you'll be over on the slav. But for Rava says that machloike is betumas aguf. Yeah, it's not true that they only argued about a case where the person is tamei and he's eating from the basar before the zrika of the dam, whether you'll be over a lav or not. Avol betumas basar, but when it comes to the tumah of the basar itself, before and you're eating it before the zrika of the dam, divrei hakayil ein eloika. Everybody would agree that you will not get malchus at all. Even Ish Lakish would agree that you're not going to get malchus on this.
Just a minute ago, they said you do get knuckles from eating.
So this is Rava. Rava disagrees with Abaya. Rava says that everybody will agree that you do not get malchus on this. My time, what's the reason? Kivin deloi karina bei v'tumasay olav v'nichrisa. So he says as follows: that you look at the pasuk where it speaks about not eating from the basar when it's tamei. That's the pasuk that we just quoted, veha basar. So now if you look in the pasuk that it says right before it, this pasuk veha basar, actually it's the pasuk v'tumasay olav is the pasuk right after it. When in the pasuk right after it, it says v'tumasay olav v'nichrisa. And when is that pasuk saying? V'tumasi olav v'nichrisa. This is speaking about with a case where the person is tamei, because it says v'tumasi olav, and it says v'nichrisa, you get kares. When is that pasuk v'tumasi olav v'nichrisa speaking about? Only after the zrika of the dam. This is something that Rashi already explained earlier here in the Gemara, that the Gemara in Menachos learns out that regarding the person himself, which is tamei, and eats from the basar, that yechayev kares, that's only after the zrika. So just like that pasuk is speaking about only after the zrika of the dam, but before the pasuk that says v'nichrasa does not apply. So lo karina be'basar ashiyiga b'chol tamei lo yochal. So we don't apply this pasuk v'abad. The next, it's actually the pasuk before v'abasar ashiyiga b'chol tamei lo yochal is also only before. Is only after the zrika of the dam, not before. Okay, so again, it's very simple. It's these two psukim that are written together. Because the pasuk v'tumasei olav v'nichrisa regarding a case where the person is tamei, he's chayiv kares only after the zrika of the dam. So too regarding when the basar itself is tamei, you're only going to be chayiv the malchus that it says in this pasuk if it's after the zrika of the dam and not before. But otherwise, everybody will agree that there's no malchus at all. That's Rava's approach. Now, but the question though is, but va'amamar, we quoted before, Abaye quoted that it was already darshaned from before, the v'habasar, the extra word v'habasar that it says in this pasuk, l'rabais eitzim u'levaina, that even if you're eating from something that's not edible, eitzim and levaina, that became tomei, that you're going to be chayiv malchus for this. So shouldn't that also include from the basar of before the zrika of the dam, which is not yet made to eat, that you should be chayiv malchus if you eat from it? And says the Gemara, Hacha b'mayaskina, on that drasha regarding the eitzim levayna, what is it speaking about? Kagain shekitshoy bekeli. If it was sanctified in a vessel. So regarding the eitzim on the mizbeach, you didn't just eat from the eitzim. It's the eitzim that was shoveled out from the mizbeach. When you take off the coals from the mizbeach, and a piece of wood could come along, and it's inside the shovel, which is a klisharis of the Beis Hamikdash, or the frankincense, the levayna, which is in the bezich, and also in these bowls or in these little shovels that they place it on the table. It was mekadesh it in a keli. The nasu kimi shekarvu kol matirov. In that case, they are similar to the way it is by a regular carbon after you spray the blood and you did everything necessary to be matir to eat from it. Right, so over here, when it comes to the eitzim and levaina, there's no such a thing that you spray or you do something to be matzah to eat from it. But once you mekadesh it in a keli, it's equivalent to by a carbon after the zrika of the dam. Where do we see this? The Tanan, because the Mishnah says, Kol sheyesh lo matirim mishakarvu matirav. All the karbanis that in order to be allowed to eat from it, so you have to do all the steps of the Aveda until the Zrike, and then if you're going to eat from it afterwards, then you're going to be chayiv if you eat from it, if you're tamei, because you already did everything, all the steps necessary to be matir to eat from it, then the chayiv of kares applies. But kol she'ein lo matirin, but other things that do not have these steps of the Aveda necessary to be matir it, so then when do you say that it's equivalent to that? Mishakiddush v'keli. If you mekadesh it in a klisharis, then it's the same like by a carbon when you did all the steps of the Aveda to be matter to eat. That's what the pasuk is saying regarding the eitzim and the levaina, that you'll be over on the lav. But regarding the basar, before zrike, since you did not do the Aveda necessary to be matter to eat from it, the lav does not apply at all, according to Rava. Rav Shlakish and Rav Yechon will both agree that there is no lav on this. Another machlokes the Gemara here brings between Reish Lakish and Rav Yechanan. A little bit of a different subject, but it's also between Reish Lakish and Rav Yechanan. So Itmar, we learned the following machlokes: Hamaila Evrei Behemet Meya Al Gabi HaMizbeach. A person brings the limbs of a non-kosher animal onto the mizbeach. A horse, a camel, he's being makriv on the mizbeach. Reish Lakish Amar Leike. So Reish Lakish says there's malchus for this. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Eina Leike. Rabbi Yechanan says that there's no malchus for this. So what's the source of their machlokes? Reish Lakish Amar Leike. Reish Lakish says there's malchus because tahira in Tamei Eloi. When the pasuk says that you're makriv of a carbon, what does it say in the beginning of Chumash Vayikra? You bring it minat bakar, minat tzayin, takrivu. Those are from the kosher animals. So from that it's understood that not from the non-kosher animals. So and the rule is v'lav haba meklal asay loikanolav. A lav that you deduce from this that the Torah writes what you should bring, and then from this you understand that you should not bring a tamei animal. There's malchus for that. Rabbi Yechanan says that even if it's aser to bring it on the mizbeach, but there's no malchus on this. Why? Because lav haba meklal asay ain't like an olav. A lav that you only learn out from the positive of what the Torah says that you should bring minat bakar minat tzayin. It's in a category of a eser. There's no malchus for this. That's machlekes. So it's not only a machlekes regarding this specific case, it's b'chlal a machlekes b'negeh to lav haba meklal asay, whether it has the status of a lav or a status of an essay. So here the Gemara asks on this, Masiv Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah asks from another place, from a braisa where you clearly see that a lav that comes from an essay is not a lav. There's no malchus, it's an essay. The pasuk says, Oisa teichelo. This is by the Pasha and Pasha Sre'eh, where it speaks about what's kosher and non-kosher animals. And it says, when you get to the kosher animals, Oisa, this pasuk is in Pasha Shmini actually. It says, Oisa techelo, you should eat from this, and from this you understand, V'loi behemet meya. So you should not eat from the non-kosher animals. And the lav, haba, miklal asay, is asay. And it's the lav that comes from an essa, is only an essa. That's what the Braisa here says. And therefore, as far as this pasuk is concerned, there would be no malchus because there's no lav over here. And that's why there's another pasuk actually. Rashi brings, because this pasuk itself is only an essa. There's another pasuk where it says there ach ezeh loy toichlu. There, when it says loy toichlu, clearly a lashon of a lav. That's why you would get malchus for someone that eats from non-kosher animals. Okay, so you clearly see the Braisa says a lav that's only based on the lashon of a es and the pasuk is not a lav. So Rabbi Yaakov says to Rabbi Yirmiyah, and he explains to him that Asbar Alacha. I'll explain to you when was the machlokes of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan. If someone takes the limbs of a non-kosher animal and he's makriv on the mizbeach to kula amale pligi, they're not arguing about this. Definitely, he's over on a eseh, but there's no malchus for this. Ki pligi b'chaya. They're arguing about the person that brings a chaya on the mizbeach. It's not a domesticated animal; it's a wild beast, and that's what he brought on the mizbeach. It could be a kosher animal, but it's a chaya, not a behema. And I have the tradition that the machlokes of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan is as follows. And here the opinions are switched around. Rabbi Yechanan says, Oiver be'esa. When you makriv a chaya on the mizbeach, you oiver, not on a lab, but you oiver on a esa. The Gemara will bring soon the source. Reish Lakish Amar, ein oiver b'v'loi klum. You makriv a chaya on the mizbeach, even if that's not the mitzvah of bringing a carbon, but you're allowed to bring a chaya that's kosher on the mizbeach, even though it's not a mitzvah, but it's a reshus. You're not over on anything. So Rabbi Yechanan says that you are over on a because it says in the pasuk behema. In the beginning of Chumash Vayikra, that mina behema. So behema means behema in chaya loy. The essa is saying only a behema, but not a chaya. Rish Lakish Amei Noiver Alav B'V'loi Klum. Rish Lakish says you're not over anything. Hahula mitzvah. When it says in the pasuk behema, it's saying the mitzvah is you want to bring the carbon to be mekayim the mitzvah, so that's behema. A chaya, you don't have the mitzvah. It's only a rishus, but it's not. You're not over on any yes at all. Okay, but Rashi says even according to this over here, tmeya, a tummy animal, everybody will agree that you're not allowed to bring on the mizbeach, even if you're not medayik from this pasuk here. But there's a different drasha that the Gemara says in Menachos, mimashke Yisrael. It has to be that the karbanis that are brought on the mizbeach has to be from something that's allowed for a yid to eat. Okay, so this is the machlokes over here. So Rish Lakish has a new concept. You can bring from a chaya, all those animals the Torah always says you bring from a bakam and a tzayim, behema. That's the mitzvah. But even if you bring from a chaya, it's rishos to bring any other things on the mizbeach as well. Meisav Rav, so Rav asks on this. It says in the Braisa clearly not like Rish Lakish. Ilu nema karbon Hashem behema. If the Torah would just write once in the beginning of Chumash V'Yikra that it has to be behema, so then I would say, what does behema mean? Chaya b'chlal behema. I would say that behema is a general term that includes a chaya as well. Where do I see this? Kein Yishanema, like it says in the parsha where it speaks about the kosher and non-kosher animals. This is the pasuk in Parshas Re'ei. Zayis behema shatoichlu, and then it says sharisek sovim v'seizim, and then it says ayol tzvi v'gaimer. So it starts off saying behema, and it starts listing what a behema is: an ox and a lamb. But then it also says a ayil and a tzvi, which is a hart and a deer. See, these are chaya; they're not behema. So from this I see that behema includes a chaya as well. So by a carbon, when the Torah says behema, I would say that it includes chaya as well. Talmud Laimar, therefore the pasuk in Vayikra goes on to spell out bakar v'tzayin, which is bakar v'tzayin amarti lecha v'loy chaya. The Torah is when it says behema, it means cattle and large livestock, small livestock, but not chaya. So now, but yachayol. Again? Eating, but we're talking about bringing as a carbon on the Mizbeach, that it's not included in the Lashon of Behemah and the Pasuk.
You're allowed to eat what?
Chaya.
Chaya?
Ayol and a Tzvi. These are the two that I mentioned over here.
We're allowed to eat?
Yes, so Ayol and a Tzvi. Yachol lo yavi, but I would think now that you should not bring it as a carbon. But v'im hevi, b'diavad, if you do bring it as a carbon, this is not the mitzvah of the carbon. But if he brings it kosher, it would be kosher. And furthermore, I would say as follows: what would I compare what the pasuk is saying here? A student where his teacher tells him, bring me wheat, and the student brings him wheat and barley. He adds even more. So he's not doing against the will of his teacher. He's adding the kosher, and therefore it's okay. So here as well, the Torah says to bring a behemoth, so you can bring a behemoth. So if a yid brings a chaya, he's adding something which is a rishus. It's not what the Eibush just said, but he's adding something additional. It'll be kosher. That's what I would think. Talmud Loimar bakar v'tzayin. The Torah says a second time bakar v'tzayin to let me know bakar v'tzayin amarti lecha v'loy chaya, that it's tafke bakar v'tzayin from domesticated animals, from behema, and not from a chaya. And therefore, you have to say as follows: what is the Torah telling me? This should be compared to l'talmud shamalei rabbi, a student that his teacher tells him, Al tovili elochitim. I want you to bring me only wheat. And veheviloi chitim esairim, and he brings him wheat and barley. She'enikam al dvarav. So he's not doing a favor and adding to what the teacher said. Elakamavid al dvarav. Here he's going against the teacher's will, as he clearly said, only wheat. So the Torah says clearly again, sayin ubakar, to exclude chaya. Till here's the lashon of the Braisa. Upasel, and therefore a chaya on the mizbeach will be pasel. So it says the Gemara to Yufta the Rish Lakish. This is a refutation of what Rish Lakish said, that a chaya is a rishus to Yufta. This refutes Rish Lakish's opinion. Okay, the Gemara now goes back to the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, beginning of this Perek, the kulon shekiblu chulu, that the psulim that it mentioned in the Mishnah, that's the opening of the Perek, kol psulim, different people that are possible to do the Aveda, that if they were makabel, the dam, what do you do in such a case? So if they were makabel the dam, chutz l'zmani, chutz l'mekaymai, it doesn't passel that you can't now do it over again. If there's more dam, a hanefesh in the throat of the animal, so a kain which is kosher can go and be makabel the dam again, and spray the blood on the Mizbeach. That's what it said in the Mishnah. And Reish Lakish asked from Rabbi Yochanan regarding this. Pasol mao sheyasa shirayim. What happens if you have a kohen which is pasol that not only was he makabel the dam, but he took that dam and he also sprayed it on the Mizbeach? The question is, what happens now to blood that's still in the throat of the animal? Could you go back to the blood of the throat of the animal and use it to spray in the Mizbeach or not? What's the shaila about this? The shaila over here is, what happens usually by a carbon? When you brought the dam and you sprayed it on the Mizbeach, so then any leftover blood that's still in the throat of the animal, you can't do any more the avodah with it. The avodah of the blood, spraying it on the Mizbeach, is done. After you finish spraying the blood on the Mizbeach, you take the leftover blood that's inside the vessel, and you're supposed to pour it down by the foundation of the Mizbeach. What's with any other leftover blood that's in the throat of the animal? That leftover blood is there's a lot of blood in the Beis HaMikdash that just flowed out in this canal that they had that flowed out into Nachal Kidron, which was a place that went outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So usually, once you're done with the zrika of the dam, the leftover blood in the throat of the animal just flows out, and you can't do anything with it. So Reish Lakish is asking, over here, when the blood of this behemoth was sprayed on the Mizbeach in a puzzle away, because a puzzle Kohen did it, will I also say that the blood that's left in the throat of the animal becomes shirayim? And the term shirayim over here means that now it's not usable anymore. Now it just has to be spilled out, not even by the foundation of the Mizbeach. It's just washed out of the Beis HaMikdash.
Or can we use
Or no. When do I say that the blood that's in the throat of the animal can't be used for anything if the avodah was done with a proper zrika by a kosher kohen? But in this case, since it was done by a pasal kohen, so that doesn't count as a zrika. Doesn't count as anything. So therefore, the leftover blood in the throat of the animal could still be used.
Yeah.
Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan answers, Ein oise shirayim, that when you do a zrika on the Mizbeach and it's done in a pasal away, so then it's not going to make the blood which is left in the throat of the animal shirayim, that it can't be used anymore, ella if it's chutz l'zmanoi v'chutz l'mekaymai. If the psul in this zrika is the fact that he sprayed the blood on the Mizbeach with a kosher kohen, but he had the wrong machshava, that chutz l'zmanoi, it'll be eaten out of its right time, or chutz l'mekaymai, that it'll be eaten out of its right place. Over here I say that this zrika of the blood had some effect. And because it had some effect, therefore, the leftover blood in the throat of the animal is going to become shirayim, which means it can't be used anymore. What does it mean it had some effect? Because over here, when you spray this blood on the Mizbech with this kind of machshava, it accomplishes that now it becomes pigul, that if you eat from this basar, you're going to be chayiv kares. So what you just did had some kind of effect, even if it's for the negative. So therefore I say that this blood was used and it was effective already, so the leftover blood in the throat of the animal just has to be spilled away. But over here, when you have a pasal akayim that sprays the blood on the Mizbeach, what he did, his action is completely worthless. So therefore we say it's like nothing was done. So you go back to the throat of the animal, and you could still use the throat of the animal for, it's not going to be shirayim, it's not something that has to be just spilled out. Rav Zvid, this is the way, one version of this Ibaya, and the answer that Rav Yochanan gave to this. Rav Zvid Masni Hochi. Rav Zvid says as follows: the Bayim in Reish Lakish from Rav Yochanan, the Shaila of Reish Lakish from Rav Yochanan was Kois Pasal Mahu Sheyasa Shirayim. What happens if you have the vessel of the blood that became pasal? How did it become pasal? So, for example, it was taken out of the Azar of the Beis HaMikdash, so it became pasal. And then that blood was sprayed on the Mizbeach. So it's now pasal, and you went and you did the zrika. Will the leftover blood in the throat of the animal become shirayim or not? The same kind of ibaya that we asked before, but over here he's asking it regarding when not a kohen, which is pasal, did the avodah, but when the blood itself became pasal because it went out of the Mizbeach. Amalei, sorry, Rabbi Yochanan answers, psul gufei mai sviralach. What would be your opinion? You're asking me about the case where the blood itself became pasal and you sprayed it on the Mizbeach. What would be your opinion regarding when the kohen himself was pasal and he sprayed it on the Mizbeach, which is what the ibaya of Reish Lakish was according to the first version here. And therefore Rabbi Yochanan said they're going to be the same. If when a kohen, which is pasul, sprays in the mizbeach, what happens now is that the blood in the throat of the animal has to be spilled out. So then kais pasul nami mashvi shirayim. So then the kais, which was with blood that's pasul in it, will also have the same effect, that the blood in the throat of the animal becomes shirayim. But if you're going to say that when the kohen that's pasul sprayed the blood, him spraying had no effect at all. So therefore, the blood in the throat of the animal does not become shirayim. Because the zrike, you can't say, oh, the avodah was done. It wasn't done. The kohen was pasul, had no effect. So therefore, kais pasul nami, the same is when the blood in the kais was taken out of the azara, and therefore its blood is pasul, nami le'mashvi shirayim. When that blood is sprayed on the mizbeach, it will not turn the blood that's left in the throat of the animal into shirayim that you have to just spill out. You can use that blood. The Gemara brings a third version to this kind of yibaya, but here actually this is a little bit of a different yibaya that Rabbi Yirmiyah brings that Abaya asked. Rabbi Yirmiyah medifti masni hochi. He taught that the Ibaya regarding the subject was as follows: that Ibaya minei Abaya mirabba. Abaya asked the Shaila from Rabba, Kais mao sheyase es chaveiroi dochoi oy shirayim. What happens if you have a kais for a carbon? So Rashi says, for example, by the carbon chatas, you have to spray the blood of the carbon chatas on the mizbeach on four corners of the mizbeach. Actually, it's not spray; it's with the finger. You place it on the mizbeach. So what happens if the kohen was makabel blood into two different kelim, and he did the placing the blood on the mizbeach from one keli, and the other keli they did not use at all to place the blood onto the mizbeach. What happens now to the keli that they did not use? Is that blood going to have the status of dochoi? Dochoi means that because the Aveda was already done with the blood in one keli, so now the blood that is in the other keli, which wasn't used from it at all, what do you have to do with that blood? Because it was never used b'chlal, you just have to spill it out. As I mentioned before, spilled it out means that this blood flows out in this amma, in this canal in the Azara that goes down to Nachal Kidron. That's what the Gemara over here calls dochoi. Oy shirayim, or it becomes shirayim. Shirayim in this context over here means that even though I only use the blood of one keli, but now the blood of the other keli is considered to be the remnants of the blood that was placed on the mizbeach. And what's the halacha of the shirayim of blood that was placed on the mizbeach? Once it's in a vessel, that blood that's already in the vessel, it actually has to be poured onto the yisoid, onto the foundation of the mizbeach. That's what shirayim means over here. Don't confuse the lashon shirayim here and the lashon shirayim that the Gemara used before. In the beginning, when the Gemara used the term shirayim in the Ibaya of Rish Lakish, there the word shirayim means that it's a borrowed term over there. Over there it means that it just has to be poured out. You don't do anything with it. Over here, the Gemara is making a distinction. There's dochoi and there's shirayim. Dochoi means that because you have to just throw it out. Because you didn't use any blood of this vessel to place on the mizbeach, so this vessel you just have to. It's like the vessel. It's like the blood in the throat of the animal. You just have to spill out. Or shirayim, because there's two vessels, and it was one vessel that I did use, so the other vessel also becomes shirayim, where it has the halacha that has to specifically be poured on the yisoid of the mizbeach. That's the shayla.
Why does he have two vessels?
For whatever reason, you're right. There's no reason really to have. Maybe the first one filled up, so you had a second one. But yeah. Amalei, so Rabba answers, Plukte the Rabbi Lazar Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan. This shaila is a machlokes, Tanaim, Rabbi Lazar Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan. The Tanya, as we learned in Abraisa, L'mayla Oimer, earlier on in the Torah, when it speaks about a carbon chatos, and this is the carbon chatos of a nasi, that has to bring a specific carbon. So over there it says, as dama yishpoich, you spill the remnants of the blood on the yisoid of the mizbeach. But then there's another pasuk later on where it speaks about a regular carbon chatos for any individual. The pasuk uses the term ves kol dama yishpoich, adds the word kol. So what's the difference? Why here it says dama yishpoich and here it says kol dama yishpoich? So the answer is as follows: it's two different cases. How do you know if the case over here is the person received the blood of the carbon chatos in four different vessels? And now, v'nosan matona achas mizeh, he actually used each one of these vessels to place his finger inside and then place the blood on the mizbeach. So now each one of them were used, Shekula nishbachal liyasayit. So this halacha of spilling out the shirayim to the foundation of the mizbeach will apply to each one of the 4 vessels because you used all 4. Talmud Laima ves kol dam yishpach. The pasuk here is saying, you may think, well, you only have to pour out one of them, but no, because you used all 4, so all of them have to be poured onto the mizbeach, and this is the pasuk where it uses the term kol. All 4 have to be poured on the foundation of the mizbeach. Now, Yochel, I would think that if the case here was he has these 4 vessels, Nasan Arba Batanis Mikais Echad, that he only used one of the vessels to place all 4 of the matanis on the corners of the mizbeach. So I would think that even then, that you have to spill the blood of all 4 of these vessels onto the foundation of the mizbeach. Talmud Laimar. So here's where you have the other pasuk where it says Ve'ez damai, that you spill the blood onto the foundation of the mizbeach. Okay, it said, what is this pasuk saying? It doesn't say the word kol. Hu nishpach, that vessel that you used the blood from it to place on the mizbeach. So now the leftovers is spilled on the foundation, liyasai, to the foundation of the mizbeach. But ve'hein nishpach alama. The other kelim which were not used to put the matanis on the mizbeach, they are discarded. They're just poured out to flow into the canal that flows out of the Beis Hamikdash. You don't have to pour it on the foundation of the mizbeach.
Number 4.
Yeah, exactly. Number 2, 3, and 4. The other ones that were not used.
Well, you use 1 and 2, no?
No, in this case, he only used from one of them. So the other ones are spilled out, they're discarded. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon what Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon says, when you receive the blood of the chatas in 4 different vessels, and you only used one of them for the matanis to place on the mizbeach. But still, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon says, that even in this case, you do have to pour all of them onto the foundation of the mizbeach. How do I know this? Talmud Laima ves kol dama yishpach. When it says kol dama, it's coming to say that even in this case where you only used one of them, all of the blood has to be spilled on the foundation of the mizbeach. Now, according to, so they clearly see that this case that we were speaking about is a machlokes tanaim here. V'hakseh ves dama yishpach. But the other pasuk where it says that you spill the blood and it does not say kol, what case is that pasuk speaking about? Rabashi says, Ahu lemute shirayim shebetzaver behemo. What's left in the throat of the animal still. It's on that you say that you don't have to take from that and pour it onto the foundation of the mizbeach. That's something that once the avodah of the zrika is done, what's left in the throat of the animal, that's discarded. That you just spill away. That, therefore, it says domi and not kol to exclude what's left in the throat of the animal. Okay, going back to the Mishnah, kibul hakosher v'nasan lepasachulu. So the Mishnah said a few examples where you did the avodah, but then there was something that's possible that got involved in the middle. But you could then go back and continue with that avodah. So the first example the Mishnah said is a person, a kohen that's kosher, received the blood, but then he gave it to a pasal kohen. So the Mishnah says yachzer kosher. You should give it back to the kohen that's kosher to continue the avodah. Second example of the Mishnah was a kohen received the blood on his right hand, then he placed it into his left hand, which you don't do the avodah with the left hand, and then you just give it back to the right hand. And the third example of the Mishnah was that he received it in a kli kodesh, in a kli sharas of the Beis Hamikdash, but then it was poured into a regular vessel, kli chayil. So you put it back into the kli kodesh. Those were the examples of the Mishnah for this halacha. So the Gemara explains why the Mishnah says all of these 3 examples. It's necessary to say all of them. The Yashmin apostle, if I would only say the case of the fact that you gave the blood to the kohen which is pasul, and then you say that you can give it back to the kohen which is kosher, you can continue the avodah. Hava mineh, my pasul. I would say when the Mishnah here says pasul, what kind of a pasul are we talking about? It means actually a kohen, but he's tamei. The kohen which is tamei, that's why he's pasul. And the reason why, if he took the blood, you could then give it back to the kohen which is kosher, is because of chazil avodah sibur. Because this kohen which is tamei is not completely disqualified of doing the avodah. In a case where the tzibur is tamei, by a carbon tzibur, there is a case where even the kohen which is tamei could do the avodah. So maybe therefore when he received the blood, he will not passel this carbon, and he can give it back to the kosher to do the avodah. Aval smile loy, but if you put it into his left hand, the left hand is, you don't have this halacha that by a tzibur you could do the carbon. So therefore I would say that once it's in the left hand, it passes it altogether. You can't continue anymore. But on the other hand, if we would say the case of the left hand, I would say the isleach sheira Even though regarding a carbon, I don't find that a left hand is ever used, but I do find a certain avodah in Yom Kippur that it's done with the left hand, because the kohen, when he goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so he has a shovel that he holds in his right hand, but then he has a kaf, a spoon that he holds in his left hand. So therefore, over there is an avodah that's done with the left hand. That's the reason why, if you took it into his left hand, you can give it back to the right hand. But when the blood was poured into a mundane vessel, I would say that's never used in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, once it's in the Kli Chayil, it should pass the carbon. But on the other hand, v'yashmir on Kli Chayil, if it would only tell me this halacha that if it was poured into the Kli Chayil, that you can pour it back into a Kli Kodesh, I would say the reason is because this Kli Chayil, it's fit to turn it into a Kli Shadis. So that's the reason why, if it's poured into this keli, you could then pour it back into the Kli Kodesh. Aval Hanoch, but when it comes to the puzzle, kain that's puzzle, or to the left hand, Malay, over there, you can't ever switch the left, or the kain which is puzzle, you can't switch it. So I would say over there, it doesn't apply. That it should still be qualified to pour back or to continue the Aveda. Tzricha, therefore the Mishnah had to say all of these cases that you could still continue the Aveda, and whatever was done in between is not counted. It's just it was like a stop in between, but you can go back to doing the Aveda with the Kayin, which is kosher. What's the pshat in this inyan? Why wouldn't I say regarding this case that once there was something that was done puzzle in the middle, this should now reject it? It should be completely rejected. Why? Because this is a halacha that it says many times by Kachim, and we had it before here in the Gemara as well. Rashi here brings the lashon. It's called nire v'nitche, something that was fit to be brought as a carbon, and then it gets rejected. So once it was fit and then it was rejected, it usually cannot be rectified. So over here in this case as well, once it was given to a puzzle or to the left hand or to a Kli Chayil, and at that point it was dochu, you couldn't bring it on the mizbeach this way. So why should it be nirev again? Why should it be fit to be brought again? Ravashi, Hachi Omar, Rav Yirmiyah, Medifti, Mishmei, Derove. Hamani, who is the Tan of our Mishnah that says that you could continue the Aveda after this? Chanan HaMitzri, who? This is Chanan HaMitzri, the Lesle D'chuyin. He does not hold of this entire concept that once a carbon becomes rejected, it's a moment where you can't bring it, you can't ever rectify it. He holds, no, you could rectify it. Tanya, as we see this in a Braisa, Chanan HaMitzri says, and this is a Braisa that speaks about the Avodah of Yom Kippur. So as you know, on Yom Kippur, there were two goats that were brought. What happened with these two goats? The Shnei Seirim, one went to the Azazel, and then one was brought as a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash. Now these two goats are dependent one on the other. The halacha is that if the goat that was supposed to be sent out to the Azazel died, so the carbon of the other side that is brought as a carbon cannot be brought. The other one still has to be alive. Same as the other way around. If the blood of the carbon of the one that's being brought as a carbon is spilled or is not good, so that you can't send out the other one to the Azazel. These are a pair, they're together, they have to look similar, and you make a girdle between the two of them, they go together. Now, Chanan HaMitzri says, Afile dam bekais, if you have the blood that's already shechted from the goat that is in a vessel, and then what happened? The other goat died. So you may say, so at that point, when the other goat died, so now the blood that's in the vessel cannot be brought. There was a point where it was dachur, where the carbon cannot be brought because the other sa'ir that has to be sent to the Azazel has to be alive in order to be able to do the Aveda with this sa'ir that the blood is now in the vessel. So even in this case, Chanan HaMitzri says, maybe chaveiroi umezavig loy. So you wait until you bring another goat that will be its peer, and then you could continue doing the Aveda. So you clearly see that Chanan HaMitzri says, even though this blood in the vessel was at a point that it couldn't be used, but then afterwards you bring another goat and it can be used again. Now Rashi over here explains that Chanan HaMitzri uses the lashon of afilu, because there is another opinion that says that this applies when the two goats, when it's alive, that even when it's alive, that you say this halacha of dochui, balechayim nidochim. We had this concept before in the Gemara, that even if one died, let's say the sar mishtaleach died, when the sar that's brought as a carbon it has to be brought as a carbon, and at that point when it was alive, it was dochui. You already cannot bring these two. You have to bring two goats. You have to replace both of them. But there's another opinion that says no, that there's no such a thing as Balei Chayim Nidachim. When they're alive, it will not get rejected. You just have to bring one more goat if the Sarah Mishtaleach died. You just replace that one. The Chanan HaMitzri goes a step further. Chanan HaMitzri says that even the carbon, the blood that is in the vessel, is now dochoy. I can't bring it because the other goat died. It doesn't matter. You just wait and you replace the other goat, the Sarya Mishtaleach, and that allows you to now use this blood that was rejected, but now it becomes fit again, and you can use it. It's not a problem. So therefore, that's the Tana of our Mishnah. The Aveda, the blood was given to someone that's puzzle, or in a left hand, or in a klichayil, but it can be rectified. You can do it again. Ravashi Amar, however, Ravashi disagrees. He says our Mishnah does not have to be only according to this opinion of Chanan HaMitzri. Kol shebiyodoi lehavadochui. Our Mishnah is a different kind of situation. Anything that is in the hands of the person, the kohen, to fix, it can be fixed. It's not a problem. In the case of the Sarah Mishtaleach over there, when the goat that was supposed to be sent to the Azazel died, you don't even know if this is something that can be fixed. How do you know you're going to find a new goat? Maybe you won't find a new goat. So over there you say that once the blood that you have in the vessel was rejected of being used, so even after you find a new goat, you can't use it again. That's called dochoy. But over here in our case, when the blood was given to someone that's puzzle, so you go back to the one that's kosher. Since it's something that you could easily fix, if it's biyodai to fix, over here the concept of dochoy does not apply. Even according to those opinions that say that there is this concept of nire v'nitche. So Rav Shia says, Kavase that Rav Ashi mistavre. Like Rav Ashi says, that our Mishnah is Lakula Alma, not only like Chanan HaMitzri, it's logical, because Man Shamat Leila Isle Duchuyin, who's the Tana that holds this concept? That once a carbon is rejected, it cannot be rectified. Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, V'oi Dama Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, Nishpach Adam. This is again going back to the case of the two goats on Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if the blood of the one that's brought as a carbon spilled, so then Yom Samishtalech. Then the other goat that has to be sent to the Azazel also is going to be left to die. You have to replace both of them. Because once it was rejected, because at that point when this blood spills, then the other sar cannot be sent to the Azazel. As I mentioned before, they're a pair, they have to be together. So since at that time when the blood spilled, it could not be sent, so then you have to replace both of them. And the same in the opposite. If the one that's sent to the Azazel died, so now the one that was brought as a carbon cannot be used at that time. So now, once it was nitche, you cannot use it anymore. You have to just spill out the blood and you have to replace both of them. So Rabbi Yehuda, he's the source that says that once there was a moment in time that it was nitche, it cannot become roy again. And at the same time, though, Rabbi Yehuda, which is the source of this opinion, he holds the Amar Kol Shebiyadai Lo Yavadochi, that if it's something that was not fit, but it's in your hands to fix it, then it's not dochi. Tanya, as we learned in Abraise, or this is the Tanana Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in Psachim, Rabbi Yehuda says regarding the carbon Pesach. Kais echad haya. So Rashi here says that on Erev Pesach they brought the karbanis. There was so many yidden. There was such a commotion. There was so much blood that you have blood that could be spilled on the floor, and not necessarily was it ever sprayed on the mizbeach. If it's not sprayed on the mizbeach, the carbon Pesach is not kosher. So there was one kais haya memale midama teruvis. You can pick up the blood from the floor that was spilled on the floor, and you pick up that blood, and then you spray it on the mizbeach. V'zarka izrika achas kenegada yisayid, and you spray that blood on the foundation of the mizbeach, and it's going to be kosher. Which means that Shema Mina, I see from here, Kol Shebiyadai Lo Yavadochi. This blood, it was in the vessel, then it gets spilled on the ground, and then you're gathering from the ground the blood, and all in one vessel. And it could be from different karbanis. Rashi here says there's another detail to this, that from here you see that Rabbi Yehuda also holds that dam is not mavatal dam, that you can have blood from different karbanis of the same carbon Pesach, but all the bloods together, they gathered it and they sprayed it on the mizbeach or poured it on the mizbeach, and even though when it was on the floor it was not fit for the aveda, but now you gather it again and you pour it on the mizbeach and it's good. So what do you see? That if it's something that could be fixed, that's not called dochoy. Shema Mina. So therefore, it's the same thing in our Mishnah as well. That therefore, this could still be fixed and it's okay to be done further.